In today's world, where attention is currency, where perception beats truth, and where the loudest voice often wins, many find themselves losing ground. Not because they're weak, not because they're unworthy, but because they're still playing checkers in a world that rewards chess. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to see through the noise, to read between the lies, to move in silence while others are shouting for approval. This video is not about manipulation for manipulation's sake. It's about power with purpose, about leading with clarity, striking with precision, and influencing without ever raising your voice. Because in a society that's constantly trying to deceive you, your sharpness is your shield. Your ability to outthink is your only real advantage. So if you're ready to walk into any room, not just to be noticed, but to be respected, feared, followed, listen carefully. These are 5 timeless Machiavellian rules for total dominance. Ancient in origin, but made for the modern battlefield. This is Psychology Insights. Let's begin. Rule number 1. Master the power of silence. Rewritten script for voiceover. There's a reason the wisest people in history are remembered, not for how much they said, but for when they chose to say it. In a world that worships visibility and rewards constant noise, silence is no longer seen as strength. But make no mistake, true power has always been quiet. As Carl Jung once said, in each of us, there is another whom we do not know. Silence is how we meet that hidden self, and how we stop revealing everything to a world that hasn't earned access to our mind. We live in an age that fears stillness. From the moment we wake up, we are bombarded. Notifications scream for our attention, opinions are weaponized, and platforms reward reaction over reflection. It's easy to get pulled into the noise, to feel like silence means weakness or disconnection. But here's the truth. Silence is not the absence of power. It is the refinement of power. It's composure under fire. It's awareness in the middle of chaos. It's the ability to observe without being observed, to calculate without being calculated. Those who cannot sit in silence are usually those who do not trust their own presence. But when you can sit in a room and not feel the need to speak, defend, or fill the air with commentary, you are no longer performing. You are operating from self-possession, not insecurity. And that makes people take notice, not because you're loud, but because your restraint speaks louder than their noise ever could. In modern life, most people speak not to connect, but to be seen. They fear being overlooked, so they over-explain. But in doing so, they leak power. They show their intentions, their wounds, their need to be validated. Silence, on the other hand, is surgical. It gives you the chance to see the full picture before you act. It slows down the moment, allowing clarity to replace impulse. The longer you can sit with discomfort without reacting, the stronger your position becomes. And this is not about emotional suppression. It's about emotional precision. A wise person knows that not every battle is worth fighting, not every comment is worth correcting, and not every insult is worth acknowledging. Because when you speak too soon, you give your enemies a map to your insecurities. You become predictable. But when you withhold, you become unreadable. And that, especially in high-stakes environments, is invaluable. Think of the lion. It doesn't announce its attack. It studies. It moves through the grass in silence. The roar comes only after the hunt, never before. That's a lesson for modern power. The ones making the most noise are usually catching the least. And often, the more someone tries to provoke you, the more they reveal about themselves. Don't give them the satisfaction of your reaction. You don't need to prove your strength in words. Show it in your restraint. There will be moments when people lie about you, test your patience, misrepresent your actions, or try to drag you into chaos. Don't always defend yourself. Don't always correct the record. Sometimes, the most strategic move is no move at all. Because the truth doesn't need to scream to survive. It just needs time. And silence gives it the space to rise on its own. Even deeper than strategy, there is a spiritual dimension to silence. It creates room not just for analysis, but for revelation. When the noise fades, intuition speaks. When you stop filling space with words, insight rushes in. That's why some of your clearest realizations come not in arguments or debates, but in the still moments, when your soul finally has room to breathe. And the benefits don't end there. When you master silence, you start noticing what others miss, the tension in a person's smile, the fear behind their confidence, the motive behind their compliment. You begin to see patterns, not just events. This isn't paranoia, it's perception. And it's only accessible to the quiet observer, never to the compulsive talker. When you sit in silence, not to impress, but to listen, you develop command over your instincts. Your silence is not a pose. It's proof that you're not addicted to reaction. You no longer owe the world an immediate answer, only a deliberate one. So here's the takeaway. In an age of noise, become a master of silence. Let others waste energy reacting. You observe. Let others demand attention. You command it by not needing it. The person who can keep their peace when the world tries to steal it is the one who already holds the crown. Stay silent. Stay sharp. And remember, sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Once you master silence, the next step is shaping what the world does, see, because if you don't define your presence, the world will misread it for you. Rule number 2, control perception, control power. If silence is your shield, perception is your sword. In a world where opinions harden into facts within seconds, shaping how others see you isn't manipulation, it's survival. As Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But the truth goes deeper. They project that avoidance onto others. They don't see you as you are. They see you through the lens of their fears, assumptions, and unresolved stories. And unless you learn to shape that lens, it will distort your presence. Most people don't operate on truth. They operate on belief. And belief is rarely based on facts. It's built from impressions, symbols, tone, posture, and timing. That means the real battlefield isn't truth versus lies. It's clarity versus confusion. If you can influence perception, you influence behavior. That's where quiet power begins. This is why many competent, sincere people are overlooked. They believe that being good is enough, that truth speaks for itself. But in a world addicted to image, the unseen truth remains powerless. You may have courage, wisdom, and vision. But if you project hesitation, insecurity, or invisibility, people will mirror that back to you. Not because they're malicious, but because perception fills the gaps before understanding arrives. Meanwhile, others rise, sometimes with less talent, less integrity, because they master the appearance of strength. They know that influence is built before anyone checks your substance. Their words are deliberate. Their pauses are powerful. Their presence does half the work before they speak. This isn't about deception. It's about discipline. Transparency without timing is exposure. Truth without direction is noise. How you carry yourself, the calm in your posture, the gaze you hold, the silence you allow, sends signals stronger than any speech. You're either broadcasting confidence or leaking uncertainty. And most people decide who you are within seconds. You don't need to become someone you're not, but you must become intentional. People carry silent expectations about confidence, status, and control. If you don't guide those expectations, the world will, and usually to your disadvantage. Show up unsure, and they'll doubt you. Show up grounded, and they'll feel it before they can explain it. Think of a king in rags, ignored. Now place a crown on his head. Nothing internal has changed, but the room does. That's the power of perception. It moves people before truth has a chance to speak. That's why great leaders use mystery wisely. They know when to reveal and when to let silence build presence. Sometimes, Being underestimated is an advantage. Sometimes, the strongest voice is the one that doesn't speak until the room is ready to listen. In your life, perception shows up everywhere. Interviews, relationships, negotiations. People don't respond to your intentions. They respond to your energy, your presence, your projection. So carry yourself with calm strength, speak with purpose, and remember, you don't need to explain everything. You just need to ensure that what you do show builds trust, not doubt. When you shape perception, you don't have to chase power. You become it. Rule number 3. Win the mind before you win the fight. Rewritten script for voiceover. Before any war is fought, before any decision is made, before a single word is spoken, there is a battle that happens silently and invisibly. The battle for the mind. Every external conflict is first an internal calculation. Every argument, every negotiation, every confrontation begins not with action, but with interpretation. What you think, what they think, and what you believe they think. This is where true power is either built or broken. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that is precisely why the mind must be mastered first. Because if you do not seize control of your mental narrative, someone else will. You can have all the skill in the world, all the credentials, the charm, the strength, but if your thinking is fractured, if your internal voice is disoriented, you will walk into battles already half defeated. The strongest people in the room are not always the loudest. They are the ones who have already resolved the outcome within themselves. That is why real power starts with clarity, not combat. The truly strategic don't begin by asking, "What should I say?" They ask, "What do they already believe?" Because if you can win a person's perception, if you can shift their framework, you don't have to fight them. You guide them. The resistance is bypassed, and what looks like agreement becomes quiet surrender. This is not manipulation. This is mastery. Most people prepare for confrontation by sharpening their arguments, but the wise prepare by planting the right thoughts before the conversation even begins. They understand that the mind is not just a battlefield. It is the throne from which all decisions descend. If you influence a thought, you influence a direction. If you shift a belief, you shift behavior. And this applies far beyond strategy. It governs your own life. Because the conflicts that consume you are rarely about what's happening around you. They're about what's happening inside you. Many are trapped not by their circumstances, but by the narrative they've accepted, that they're not enough, not ready, not capable. And without ever raising a hand or facing opposition, they surrender, simply because the thought told them to. This is why the mind must be guarded, disciplined, and deliberately shaped. You cannot allow fear to speak louder than focus. You cannot let insecurity make decisions in your name. Once your thoughts are compromised, your standards collapse. And when your standards collapse, your potential goes with it. Influence does not begin with persuasion. It begins with conviction. People are drawn to those who speak from certainty, even if they disagree, because the clarity of thought cuts through the fog of confusion. A grounded mind doesn't need to scream. It commands respect with a whisper. This is the advantage of internal dominion. It precedes every external victory. Win the mental terrain, and the room moves differently around you. People sense it. They follow it. They respond to it. Even in silence, it speaks. And the wise understand. When you govern your mind, you don't need to win with volume or force. You win by presence. You avoid unnecessary wars, deflect petty resistance, and shift entire conversations, not through domination, but through direction. Because once a mind is aligned, everything else follows. The body, the will, the outcome. So guard your thoughts as a king guards his crown. Speak only from the seat of clarity. And when you step into any situation, walk in knowing the battle was already won, long before you arrived, because you mastered the mind before you ever engaged the fight. Rule number 4. Exploit the weakness that pride hides. In the game of power, pride is rarely what it seems. It looks like confidence. It sounds like certainty. But more often than not, it's camouflage, a polished surface concealing fractures beneath. As Alfred Adler noted, exaggerated pride is often a disguise for deep feelings of inferiority. And if you mistake pride for strength, you miss the deeper truth. What it's really doing is hiding fear. This fear is subtle. You'll see it in people who speak too much, too loud, too fast, hoping their dominance will distract from their doubts. They posture not to project confidence, but to protect their fragility. The louder the pride, the deeper the wound. That's why wise individuals don't confront pride head-on. They don't argue with the mask. They look for what it's covering. Because behind every overconfident statement is a need for reassurance. Behind every dismissive tone is a fear of being questioned. And behind every refusal to ask for help is a terror of appearing weak. Your advantage lies not in pushing harder, but in seeing clearer. While others are reacting to the performance, you're paying attention to the hesitation behind it, the slight pause, the rigid tone, the forced laugh. These aren't flaws, they're signals. And they're far more honest than words. In leadership, in negotiation, and even in relationships, people will often resist truth not because it's wrong, but because admitting it would crack their identity. Pride is a shield against vulnerability. The more someone needs to appear invincible, the more afraid they are of being seen. So, instead of attacking, observe. Affirm subtly when needed. Speak not to the armor, but to the person beneath it. Don't challenge their pride, disarm their fear. That's where your influence finds traction. Because pride always overreaches. It tries too hard. And when it stretches past its center of gravity, it collapses on its own. You don't need to push. You just need to wait. The true strategist knows this. Power doesn't come from exposing others. It comes from understanding what they're hiding and deciding when and if it's necessary to act on it. Let others clash with ego. You move through insight. Because once you stop being distracted by how people present themselves, you start seeing how to move through them. Rule number 5. Always remain the mystery they cannot solve. Rewritten script for voiceover. In a world addicted to exposure, where people rush to share, explain, declare, and perform, there is a rare and commanding strength in staying unknown. Not as a form of deception, but as a strategy of restraint. As Carl Jung once said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But mystery protects you from premature reaction. It shields your essence from dilution, keeping your presence ungraspable, your direction unreadable, and your influence intact. Because in any room, the most powerful person is never the one who boasts, performs, or seeks to be understood. It's the one who leaves others guessing. Not because they're hiding weakness, but because they understand. The moment people can label you, they start believing they can limit you. Predictability becomes a prison. And once you're boxed in, you become manageable, tame, and eventually, forgettable. There is a type of power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It moves quietly, speaks sparingly, and watches, while others waste energy signaling their worth. This is not arrogance. This is mastery. Because when your identity is rooted and your vision is stable, you no longer need to explain every move or defend every action. You understand that what's truly valuable is rarely loud. The oak doesn't sway in every wind. The ocean doesn't roar at every ripple. And neither do those who lead from within. Those who crave constant validation, constant exposure, reveal something else. They reveal a need to be seen in order to believe in themselves. But those who operate in mystery, they move without the need for applause. And that silence, calm, steady, unshaken, is what makes others pause before they speak your name. Modern life tempts us to overexpose. Social media conditions us to share before we've even processed. But when you reveal too much, your thoughts, your feelings, your plans, you don't just inform others, you arm them. You give them the tools to predict you, prepare for you, even manipulate you. Mystery is not about playing games. It's about playing wisely. It's about understanding that when people are unsure of what you'll do next, they proceed with caution. They hesitate. And in that hesitation, you gain the upper hand. Let others obsess over being understood. You, however, must focus on being intentional. Not everything you say needs to be explained. Not every truth needs to be shared all at once. Perception isn't about hiding. It's about highlighting what matters most. Not because you lack substance, but because you value it too much to cheapen it with premature exposure. Power, in its purest form, is quiet. It does not beg to be noticed. It does not over-explain. It does not shrink to fit the room. It simply is. And when you walk in that kind of presence, people feel it before they can name it. They instinctively adjust. They measure their words. They wonder where you stand, what you're thinking, what you might do next. And that wondering is leverage. That curiosity is control. You don't need to correct every whisper. You don't need to clarify every misunderstanding. Let the illusion do its work. Let people guess while you position yourself. Mystery also protects your inner world. When people don't know your pressure points, they can't press them. When they don't know your rhythm, they can't interrupt it. And when they don't know what matters most to you, they can't sabotage it. The greatest moves you will ever make in life are the ones you make quietly. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. While others clamor to be seen, you build unseen. While others argue for attention, you prepare in silence. And when you finally act, the impact lands 10 times louder because no one saw it coming. Even spiritually, the concept holds. God doesn't reveal everything at once. There are moments of silence, seasons of mystery, not because of absence, but because of divine timing. So too must you learn to operate. Your movements don't need explanation. Your vision doesn't need validation. And your strategy doesn't need audience approval. What is hidden is often more powerful than what is revealed. Because what people can't analyze, they can't attack. And what they can't anticipate, they can't prepare for. Let others flash. You shine. Let others be known. You be remembered. Mystery is not weakness. It is a cloak of influence. It is the quiet presence that bends a room without a word. It is the unanswered question that leaves others thinking long after you've left the room. When you are unreadable, you become untouchable. And when you are untouchable, you are unshakable. And in the age of noise, your silence is a weapon. Your restraint is a shield. And your mystery is the mark of a mind that cannot be mastered. These 5 rules are not about manipulation. They are about mastering yourself so fully that the world begins to respond differently. In this video, we explored the silent force of restraint, the power of perception, the battlefield of the mind, the vulnerability behind pride, and the strategic mystery that shields true strength. To outsmart others is not about playing games. It's about playing at a higher level of awareness, where your presence speaks louder than words, and your silence carries more weight than noise. If any part of this resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. Which of these rules do you already live by? And which one will you start applying today? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this gave you clarity or power, share it with someone who needs it. This is Psychology Insights, reminding you that real dominance doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being unmoved. Stay sharp, stay subtle, and stay in command.